estimate is a measure of occurrence which we see in survival analysis. So we start by drawing up some follow-up time that starts at time 0 and follows up until the end. And for each person in the cohort, we look whether or not that person is developing the outcome during the time that person is followed up. And some people are followed up for the complete time, some people are dropping out earlier before the end. Then we indicate whether or not the outcome occurred, so a dot is no outcome occurred and this person had an outcome of interest. The idea of survival analysis is that we divide the follow-up time by event. And what do I mean by event? An event is either a person that develops the outcome or a person that is lost to follow-up. In survival speak, this is called a failure, and a loss to follow-up is called censoring. Then within the periods that are created, we calculate the risk of the outcome. So if we look at our cohort, we see that the first event happens at this moment in time, and that event is a failure. So we have one person failing out of the 7 persons starting the follow-up. The second period is defined by the next event, which is again a failure. We have one failure, but there are only 6 persons left in the follow-up, because the person who failed in the earlier period is no longer at risk for the event. The third period is defined by the event of censoring. So in this period there are no failures whatsoever. Out of the 5 people who were followed up, nobody failed. The next period is defined again by a failure, a single failure, out of the 4 people followed up, because the person who was censored in the previous period is no longer part of our follow-up. In our last period we have again nobody failing, nobody developing the outcome, and the 3 last persons are censored. To derive at the Kaplan Meier estimate, we are going to have a trick. Instead of calculating the risk, we are going to look at survival. So if we have 1 out of 7 people having developed the outcomes, 6 out of 7 people survived that period without an outcome. In the second period, we have 5 people out of 6 surviving that period without the outcome. The next period, we have all 5 people who started surviving without the outcome. The event that occurred was a censoring, not a failure. And then we can continue here, we have 3 out of 4 surviving, and here we have 3 out of 3 surviving. Now the Kaplan Meier estimate is a conditional probability. So what does this word conditional means? To survive the second period, I first need to survive the first period. So my survival of the second period is conditional on surviving the first period. Surviving until the end is conditional of surviving all the previous periods. And from the law of probabilities, this means that we need to multiply all these individual probabilities to reach to the conditional probability at the end. And when we do that, we get a conditional probability of 0.53 at the end of follow-up. We can converge that in a cumulative incidence of the outcome by taking the 1 minus the survival, which is 0.47. And this number is slightly different than the conventional risk, which we would have calculated as 3 out of 7 or 0.43. But as seen in an earlier video, a conventional risk assumes that there is complete follow-up for all participants. The Kaplan Meier estimate deals with loss to follow-up.